We have to start with the earnings, because Q3, they came in pretty solid, but it was the outlook that disappointed, the outlook in terms of bookings and demand across Airbnb. I just wonder if you can give us a little bit more flavor, a little bit more detail about what you see in Q4 and the quarters ahead, particularly as we weigh up recessionary risks.
Well, we're really proud of the results in Q3. Again, the headline was nearly 100 million nights and experiences booked. That represents 15.6 billion in booking value. That translated into 1.2 billion of net income. That's up 46% year over year, excluding the impact of FX. Otherwise, it'd be even higher. So really good results, and it's been consistent. If you look over the last quarter since we've gone public, I think I'm very proud of that track record. You see a lot of momentum. And as we look forward, I think travel is going to remain strong. You see that people are not slowing down in their travel thus far. I think there's been a lot of speculation about growth rates. And I think the thing to remember there is, as we look back to last year, things were different. Q3 of last year was a little bit depressed from COVID. There was a spike during the summer, slowed things down a little bit. And then in Q4 last year was a little unusually strong. So as we try to predict growth rates going forward, that's a nuance that has to be factored in.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of different variables. Inflation, obviously, at
right.
4-decade highs. The consumer being squeezed, and of course that risk of a slowdown, and that view now that's starting to form of a recession in the US, at least in the quarters ahead, as the Fed raises rates another 75 basis points. But how does all of that play into that future demand then? Do you see it remaining resilient, or is they're going to crack starting to fall?
Well, I actually see it as an opportunity. On the demand side, Airbnb has something at every price point. So even in a recessionary economy, I think people still want to travel. Maybe they want a lower price point. We have that, and I think it's an opportunity to potentially take market share. On the supply side, I'm even more excited about that. Airbnb was started during a recession back in 2009. And it's how Joe, Brian, and I afforded our rent. And it's how a lot of people afforded their rent. And I think we're headed into a period where more people are going to value extra income. Already, 40% of our hosts tell us that their hosting helps them to afford their basic life expenses. And so we're focused right now, and we'll make some announcements in a couple weeks on how we're making it easier than ever to get started. I mean, think about it. This whole business, these huge numbers, 15.6 billion this quarter of GMV, is basically a result of 4 million hosts participating in Airbnb. That's a small number in the grand scheme of things. We're very focused on increasing that number. We think the economic clouds in some ways are an opportunity, and the innovation you're going to see from us is going to help further this.
And you're going to be unveiling new tools to help
right.
those hosts in November, later in November. You talk about 4 million, what's the target then? What do you want to push that up to in terms of the numbers of hosts, and in what kind of time frame?
Well, I'm not going to make specific targets and speculate about the future, but I think, look at the innovation that we're doing. I think it was during our last release, we launched something called Ask a Superhost. What this meant was when you got started, we could pair you with an experienced user to answer all your questions. We understand that hosting and opening up your home raises a lot of questions. You have a lot of uncertainty. What better way to learn about that than talk to someone who's doing it every day successfully, rather than talking to us, the company, and getting our official language on the matter. Talk to a superhost. We got more things like that are going to make it easy to become a host.
And Nate, I know that long-term stay, so more than 28 days, that is now making up, what, 20% of bookings? Do you see that holding up? Is that going to grow as a category for Airbnb?
Yeah, we think this is an exciting new opportunity that's outside the traditional kind of TAM of travel. And we've seen it be a growth opportunity. Since the start of the pandemic, it's doubled. It's grown disproportionately. Here in Europe, it's grown 160% since the start of the pandemic. We think, because of remote work, when you're thinking about working somewhere for an extended period of time, you don't want to necessarily straight away get a place for a year, especially when you haven't been in that country and explored the city yet. We see people coming to Airbnb, booking a place for a couple months, getting acclimated to the area before making a bigger decision, or perhaps they decide to move around. So I think remote work is here to stay, and I think remote work translates into more travel and more of these long-term stays. Okay,
interesting. There has been friction in some of the hotspot areas where a lot of your customers will go booking Airbnbs in places like Lisbon. What have you built in terms of functionality to kind of address that, and has it been effective?
Well, I think Airbnb has a unique ability to disperse travel. I mean, not only do we have homes in all the different neighborhoods and towns around the world, but specifically, back in the spring, we launched something called categories. It really redefines how people can search on Airbnb. In the past, on other websites, you go to a travel website, they ask you, where do you want to go? and you can't go any further in the process until you answer that question. And when people answer that question, they have a short list of things that come to their mind. On Airbnb now, when you come see our homepage, we immediately present you with categories describing the kind of experience you might want to have on Airbnb. So if we're here in Portugal, maybe I'm interested in staying on a vineyard. I don't know what the towns are that have vineyards, so show me across Portugal, the different Airbnbs that are located on vineyards. We have 56 different categories that you can use to find new places to stay that are geographically dispersed. Now, we just yesterday released the results of this. It's been out there for 6 months, and what we found is that people who use this functionality, they are less likely to stay in the top 20 kind of destinations. They're specifically 17% less likely to stay in those top destinations. They are 35% more likely to stay outside of the top 400 destinations. And on average, they're staying 5 miles further away from wherever they originally started their search. And so I think we have built this incredible muscle to disperse the benefits of tourism over a broader surface area. It's important for 2 reasons. One, our business model. It allows us to get more capacity out of our inventory, better utilize it. And then 2, with governments, they're very eager to disperse the benefits of tourism more broadly.
Addressing some of those tensions around hotspot destinations. Very briefly on competition. Hotels, analysts saying hotels are coming back with additional inventory. Your supply, they would say, is pretty high at this point. Is that going to prove a drag? Are you concerned about that competitive element stepping up?
Well, I think hotels have always been around, and they took a hard hit during the pandemic. But Airbnb's success was despite hotels, right? Like, hotels have always been there. What has made Airbnb successful is the uniqueness of the experience. That's what people want increasingly when they travel. That's what's drawn them to Airbnb, and that's going to remain true going forward in the future. And travel overall is strong, and even if there is a recession and people become price sensitive, again, Airbnb has stuff at all price points. So I think our model is super adaptable to changes in consumer behavior. That's what you saw during the pandemic. That's why we thrived during the pandemic and took market share.